Joining us now is Professor Okey Ikechukwu, political analyst and executive director, Development Specs Academy. Good morning, Okey Ikechukwu. Good to see you this morning. Quite a while.
Morning,
You've been hiding.
Good to see you after a long time.
No,
I learned you even went to Burkina Faso to avoid me because I refused to give you my cap.
Anyway, good to have you on the program. Now, this issue about willing buyer, willing seller, Dangote refinery, aviation fuel, Keyamo was saying yesterday, will be taken from Dangote's refinery. But the big concern of Nigerians is that fuel subsidy, is it actually gone or not? And then we are hearing that NNPC Limited is going to withdraw as the main off-taker to make fuel available. What will be the implication of this? What will be the social consequences? No firm announcement has been made yet, but newspapers, Premium Times and other platforms have been saying, well, if we are not careful, fuel will rise to about 991 naira per liter in Lagos and higher up to over 1,000 in other parts of Nigeria. If you could help us unpack all of these issues.
Ruben, that's a lot to unpack, but I'll take it instrumentally. First, the first thing, let's situate the narrative, because the subsidy thing is a touchy issue. It touches people's perceptions and pockets. You started by saying, what did the government mean by fuel subsidy is gone? And I will contextualize it. In May, or as at May, you and I could be importers of petroleum products, petrol in particular. So we'll import and declare the amount we've imported, and government will pay us. And then there's the extra being paid for the quantities imported. But it turns out that two of us will import 3 million liters of petrol, declare 7 million, and we get paid. Now, that was what led to that intervention, and we will deal with it with statistics. As at May, when the government came on, the nation was consuming locally at nearly 70 million liters. By the end of that month, with that announcement, what it meant is that all those engaging in importation were no longer going to be doing that for government. And that is NNPC that will be doing that. With that, it turned out actually that the figures dropped by 28% in May, just that month alone. By June, it had dropped by another 24%. So the first conclusion from that is that the money being expended on the subsidies to importers was inflated, was unreal, had nothing or not so much to do with local consumption. Now, at the second level, I can imagine the thinking, oh, well, since NNPC is our homeboy, it's likely to give us more correct figures. And that's what we saw. Now, having brought in the fuel, which is an international commodity, it has a definite price. And as government, yes, we are not paying importers. The quantity has come down. NNPC can import and warehouse. And we deal with the difference so that Nigerians will still continue to buy it cheap. That's the context, that there's narrative that needs to be clarified. Now, that's not taking a position on cost or whatever, but what that statement meant initially and its implication. If you say you were consuming 70 million liters, and within 2 months your consumption drops by 24%, just because middlemen were not there, it tells you that a lot had been happening in trillions of naira. That's at one level. Now, at the other level to the question, the solution would be to have local refineries active. And this last conference you mentioned points to three things. Number one, the resolve of local refiners to come to the front row. Two, their own deliberate effort to also propose meaningful solutions. And three, within all of this, none of them has denied the impact of the fact that oil is a global commodity and that those pricings will be there. So part of the crisis and what makes it an emotional issue is the fact that it is biting people's pocket. So those are the initial observations I would want to make. But thinking long term, if local refinery kicks off, as I hear it's about to, that they are being incentivized, What will come from it will definitely be more jobs. What will come from deregulation in the medium term, not even the long term, will also be improvements. And I draw attention to a couple of things that is our current experience. I'm sure you and I know that as at the time petrol was selling for 165, you will not get it anywhere in Anambra State for less than 200. It's been like this for more than 20 years. So if you're looking for deregulation, it's been totally deregulated in that part of the country for a long time. Now, that's not saying that, that's how it should be everywhere. But you'll also look at indices. What's the level of living? How are businesses doing? So the challenge is that this came, it has a broader spectrum impact. And so the narrative itself became distorted in the reality of increased expenses by everybody. Our emotions are involved. Nobody likes to spend more. But then within the context of that spending more, you're seeing some incentives. The complaint, and this we must acknowledge, is that there was a slight mismatch in the pace with which both the intervention and the policy drive and the ameliorating interventions were done. Nobody can contest that. But as for whether we need to, so the intention now is put it out in the market, let the prices determine, while the government is taking other measures to ensure that it doesn't become excruciating for everybody. It's emotional, it's economically irritating, and people are not, are responding as they feel in that regard.
All right, Professor Ikechukwu, I'm not sure if you were able to respond to whether there's fuel subsidy or not, based on your calculations. That's one. The second thing then would be, you touched on local refineries. We've seen NNPC move the goalpost a number of times, or the time of actualization. What is the challenge? Why can't we get it right? Why is it a problem to get at least one or two refineries working so that it would potentially or hopefully drive the price down?
I will give answers based on, if you like, partly hypothetical, partly my insight. We are here in Nigeria, and I'll go back to a conversation I had with Professor Luko. You recall he was economic advisor to Abacha. There was this thing that, look, let's make some imports. He was telling us in confidence that from the profit, people will set up refineries. He said, in fact, Abacha was enraged when he found that from the profit, very few people were reluctant to invest because it would take long time. Now, I'll go back to your question about what I said about subsidy. The point I made, I'll repeat it. When the president announced that subsidy was gone, within that month, consumption dropped by 28%, which means much of what is being paid for as to importers was for fuel not imported. And I believe all of us know about empty tankers, papers signed, and all of that. By the second month, it dropped to 24%. So that direct payment to, to importers, take this amount, bring yam for me. They were cut off. Then NNPC bring it in, let us have it. But NNPC will then be paying for the difference and government owing, etc. So we need to contextualize both distinctly. Is the narrative of clarification, the fact that there is also a differential is what makes everybody say, oh, what do you mean there's no subsidy, but there's this extra cost? But the point is that it's being defrayed closer to the actual amount of consumption and not out of existing funds. And NNPC now has a challenge continuing to carry the burden and being owed. And he said, look, let's deregulate. And at a purely, if you like, at a purely level of analysis, we must ask ourselves in how many cities in the country you get fuel at the regular price at any time, among other things. But there was the other point, second point you raised, I think I lost it.
That was on the refineries.
Oh, yes. Refineries, clearly they ought to be working. That's actually the outrageous element. I think only 2 days, the last Port Harcourt refinery, I think the last attempt or the last announced date, what did they find out? As they were about to, the heating and cooling system became dysfunctional. You see, in all of this, we must situate ourselves within the political economy of the Nigerian state. Whatever is wrong at any time, there are people benefiting from it. And they've been benefiting from it for a very long time, and it involves huge resources. That matter should be investigated much more seriously this time, because you find that the question is not, why are you not starting? Why is it being sabotaged at each point of commencement? What interests are at work? This is both a national security and economic issue. What is the competence of the technical professionals? They should all be lined up and offer us explanations. These dates are changing. Those who are monitoring them at the administrative level. Let's investigation move into technical issues. What was the stage of production what do you call it? Efficiency capacity before all of this? What were the last tests showing their readiness to commence? At what point did you discover that the cooling and heating system was dysfunctional? If it was fixed and it was ready to start, what happened? Who were those on duty? We cannot ignore the fact of economic and political forces. Yeah.
I think there's been a mix-up somewhere. You keep saying that the people that were importing, nobody was importing for NNPC. NNPC has always imported a long time. That was after NNPC started importing after their Ikechukwu report, that talked about the scam of other people bringing products in and getting their subsidy payments and all of that scam. So NNPC had been a sole importer for a while. And this shenanigan had continued by the NNPC for a while. So I think we should just clarify that. Secondly, the question I would like to ask you is this. Recently, Technimonte, the company that is said to fix this refinery, Port Harcourt refinery, was summoned, according to FOI, by Femi Falana, to tell us the date it will be complete. And they came back to tell Nigerians that after over 44 months, which this refinery ought to be complete, that they can't tell us the date it will be complete. What would you like to say about that?
What I would like to say about that is that it's unacceptable, it's outrageous, and the matter should be taken very seriously because we are talking about national funds. We are talking about inefficiencies. We are talking about possible sabotage. Because if that refinery is not producing, there must be people who are happy about it. That's why I'm also happy about the investigation. So that a culture of presumption and impunity does not emerge. That you can walk up and confidently tell us, oh, you don't know when it will start. Let us not forget that everybody there is being paid. Let us not forget that the company itself is not doing Nigerians a favor. It has a task to carry out for which agreements are made, for which funds are available. If you're saying you're not sure of the date, you also have the duty to give technically, economically, and politically acceptable reasons why, as a professional, you place the cards on the table. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why this cannot happen. But to leave it at that nebulous level, I believe it might suggest taking everybody, including the government, for granted. Detailed explanations, if that had been given, Rufai, your question would have been, how could they say it's not that? But that blanket statement, for a lot of people, it came across as offensive. It also suggested that they are not even trying to help the government that's trying to help the people by trying to do something about local refining. These are refineries that have been in place. I remember far back, Ruben will remember this, 1994, I wrote the draft editorial on that particular refinery. It was the fuel catalytic converter unit that they said had collapsed and all of that. And if you look through it, one way or another, it still revolves around that. It has a long period, long gestation, but this one of uncertainty with impunity or with apparent indifference, I may not have all the facts. Okay, Professor Ikechukwu. No. Your question is, how do I feel about that? I say, no, I don't feel good about that.
Okay, Professor Ikechukwu. Well, I should know about that editorial. That's what we do every day, isn't it? We write editorials every day. But thank you very much for joining us on The Morning Show.